to the Vimanas.
That is very interesting. You know, and well, keep going. I find it rather, exciting.
Well, one of the very interesting things is the word Nibiru. That when you actually look at the translation, obviously Zachariah Sitchin had hypothesized that Nibiru is this planet with very eccentric orbit that went way out beyond the outer the Oort cloud and the outer asteroid belt, and it had some sort of catastrophic damage done to its atmosphere, and the scientists on Nibiru had figured out how to fix it, but they needed vast quantities of gold, and so they came here, of all the places to go. They came here and created the humans as a slave species to mine gold that they took back to Nibiru. Well, the problem is that now scientists are saying that there is probably a planet out there, but it doesn't have that kind of an eccentric orbit. And it's so far out there that it'd be just an ice block because it's way beyond the habitability zone. So the science doesn't argue that Nibiru would be habitable, let alone 3 million years in advance of us technologically. But if you look at the actual translations of Nibiru done by Sumerian scholars, who can read cuneiform, they translate Nibiru as like a crossing. It's a significant point where there's a crossing that takes place, like a river, or it's a gathering point where you would board a ship or something like that, right? And it actually represents a star in the sky, and it's said that the Anunnaki god that represented the planet Jupiter was responsible for keeping that star in place and keeping this point in place. And what that actually means on a functional level is not that they're pointing to a star and say, we're coming from there. That's not it. It's more like the point of crossing, or the demarcation point, is in that direction, and you follow that star to get to it. So no matter where you are, if you find that star and you go toward it, eventually you'll come to this demarcation point. So I'm trying to figure out which star that was, because I have a sneaky suspicion that when you take a look at the actual translations done by mainline Sumerian scholars, that you're lining up with a lot of the stuff that happened in the Mahabharata, and that would have been 20,000 years ago.
Oh yeah.
And obviously the Mahabharata talks about a very, very, very technologically advanced civilization. I mean, Vimanas are delta wing aircraft, right? They had stuff going into space. They had fiery chariots that describe things coming back in through reentry. It's a very interesting. I think it's a very interesting approach to it, because I don't think the translations were bang on, shall we say.
Now, is there any chance you think the Earth maybe has been rebooted since then, and we're on another generation?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's
well.
No, go ahead.
One of the things that I've always been fascinated by is that there's a whole bunch. We think of Atlantis and Lemuria, but there's actually a whole bunch of lost islands. There's Atlantis, Lemuria, High Brazil, and Thule. And Thule was a Viking thing. They believed that Thule was not necessarily an island, but it was a place beyond the north where it was green and habitable. And some people take that to mean Hyperborea, or the inner Earth, whatever. But I think it actually represented a place, because one of the things that's interesting, I studied anthropology in college. And one of the things that's interesting is that when you look at myths, or you look at objects that you find, you can usually find, if you look at the actual cultural context, you figure out that some of this stuff is real. It's just they're describing it in extraordinary terms. And the example that I give in the article that I'm writing is that at one point when I was a teaching assistant for an archaeology class, and at one point I had access to these weird kind of pyramidal clay things, and with a hole in it, and I couldn't figure out what they were. And the person that owned them really wanted to know what they were, and I was like, I don't know. I know where they come from, where they were found, but I can't tell you what they are. They defy logic to me, And so I took them to my professor, and she looked around and did a bunch of research, and it turns out that they were loom weights used on a loom to hold the yarn in place. And to this day, there are groups in Sardinia that still use the same kind of loom weight, and it's a match. The difference is the ones that I was looking at, were 2,000 years old, and the ones that they were using were 2 weeks old, or 2 months, or 2 years, or 20 years, or whatever. But they were effectively the same thing. So if you look at myth, Joseph Campbell talked about this too. If you look at myth, there is truth in it. It's just obscured by the extraordinary. So you kind of have to cut away all the adjectives and look at the actual story. And I've believed for a long time that these 4 main islands actually correspond to the Tapa de Danann, who were a mysterious group of people who are very sophisticated, who are the foundation of the fairy folk in Ireland, and the Celts believe that, and in Scandinavia, they were referred to more like trolls and fairies, but I think they may have actually been real. And the 4 islands, Lemuria, Atlantis, Hy-Brasil, and Thule, I think correspond to the 4 treasures of the Tapa de Danann. And I think that at some point the humans got to be a little burdensome, so they went underground and basically rebooted it. They didn't do anything to help us, but they went somewhere else, and I think they went to their islands. I think they were based out of these islands. So they kind of not so much rebooted it, but more kind of like cut off access.
So they just let what happened happen, and then everything started over. That's a good way to do it. I have a strange feeling we're probably on the 3rd or 4th reboot, and I got a funny feeling we're coming close to another one.
Well, that's what the Navajo believe, that they believe that the Earth has been destroyed, I think, like 6 times. That the last time was the Ant-Men, and this time it's us. They're waiting for the 7th world, the 7th world to start. But I mean, you look around, and it's interesting because, like, when you look at Mount Shasta, right? A lot of people fall into 2 camps about Shasta. That there's this notion of it's this metaphysical hotspot, whatever. That Darrows and live inside of it, and whatever. But there is actually myth around it that the Yurok talk about a group of people called the Waga, who I think were survivors of Lemuria and members of this Tapa de Danann kind of civilization. And they talk about the Waga, who are very tall and of a different complexion than them, look different than them, descended off of Shasta and taught them some more sophisticated hunting practices, or taught them things about nature and about life and philosophical stuff. And then one day they decided that they'd had enough, that they believed that they were getting a little too cozy with the Yurok, and so they left and they went north to be with the others. And so, there's stories about that, the idea of the Quetzalcoatl, when I think it was Cortez landed in Central America, they believed he was Quetzalcoatl because he had a beard and he was tall and big and, of a different complexion.
So I got to ask you a question. All these people that, government agencies around the world have gone and created these mass underground cities. Do they think they can live through a earth change?
Yes, absolutely. That's why they did it.
Okay. So, and sometimes I wonder.
In fact, I think they're planning for an Earth change of some kind.
Well,
that's the basis of my book.
Well, that's what I really feel. Not so much a nuclear war. I think something's going to happen, and they'll start a new civilization or try to. I don't know. It's interesting when you see these underground cities, how huge they are. A friend of mine who was a trucker used to go up to some of these underground cities. And, he finally told the company he worked for he will not do it anymore because he said it was so scary. He would go into this long, tunnel thing and then have to back into, a loading dock. And then all of a sudden there's all these...
sounds like Yucca Mountain.
Yeah.
Yucca Mountain's like that.
Yeah, and then they have all these armed guards telling him if he moves his head, to keep his head looking straight, if he turns his head, they'll shoot him. So, he said after that, that was it.
Well, to put it in context, I think all that kind of stuff relates back to something called Alternative 3. But to put it in context, there's a mountain in Russia that's called Yamantau, and Yamantau is a mountain. I mean, it's a full-on mountain. And over years, the Soviets actually emptied the mountain out. And this thing is so big that they were driving freight trains into it to offload cargo inside the mountain. So, there's a base, I think, on the side of Yamantau that has 20,000 people that live in it on the side. I mean, it's enormous. And it's hollowed out. I mean, it's a huge complex of bunkers inside of it. I mean, you're talking about legit mountains. When they talk about NORAD being in Cheyenne Mountain, that's a mountain. It's not a hill. It's a mountain. You have to keep it in context,
So that's kind of scary too. Mary Joyce, who runs the reporting center out of North Carolina, she swears up and down there's a underground base in North Carolina, and she actually has gone as far as saying that technology is being shared with aliens out of it. I don't know, but she said that people have gone missing and all that stuff around there, so I don't know.
Well, it's interesting. Like I said, my thing is Alternative 3. And Alternative 2 was to build bunkers to survive an ecological collapse at some point in the future. And, you look at Svalbard, which is the seed vault, it's enormous, and it's filled with seeds, and it's not the only one. There are 12 others scattered across the world, that have heritage seeds. I mean, it's just packed tight. You can find pictures of Svalbard on the internet. I mean, it's enormous inside. But yeah, I mean, they're preparing for something, and I don't know that it's aliens. I don't think it's aliens. I think it follows more the line of Alternative 3, that it's going to be an ecological collapse. But no, they're designed. Well, you look at Raven Rock, Site R. I mean, it has a Starbucks in it. I mean, it literally has a gift shop. It's like you can buy a T-shirt that says "I survived the apocalypse," and all I got, was this lousy T-shirt.
Oh wow!
I mean, it's absurd.
I don't know. I just got a funny feeling they know something is coming. Art Bell and Whitney, wrote a book about this many years ago, and it seems like a lot of stuff that they were predicting is starting to happen. I mean, people
are becoming global superstorm.
Yeah. I mean, look at Antarctica melting and breaking up. Now they're, it's scary. And what's going to happen next? I mean, now I was reading today that we could start certain parts of the world could start going into a mini ice age.
That's what I think is going to happen, because if you look at, there are these things that are called Chinese ghost cities. Have you ever heard about them?
Oh yeah, where they built actual cities there, and it's not.
And they're empty.
Yeah, they're totally empty.
So if you look at the positions, okay. So excuse me, I'm going to cough a little bit. You have to excuse me. A lot of smoke. The Chinese are very long-term thinkers. That they run on a dynastic cycle that lasts